Can I pause right there? Speaking of the day of reckoning is upon us. You are the generation that has to deal with all these problems now. You said in college they were saying we're kicking the can down the road, and now here we are. You are that generation. How do you feel being a part of that generation? And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, mixed feelings, mixed emotions. I always had some issues with the fact that America was the bully of the world, right? Fairness is important, right? Other countries should not be forced to take on America's burden, right? So now we're reaching a point where these countries are being freed from the oppression, basically, of the American empire, right?
Mhm.
So while that will lead to and is leading to some suffering in America, there is still optimism, right?
Okay.
Because in America, we have been socialized into being individualistic.
Hmm.
Well, that can work only to an extent. At a certain time in life, you realize that you need others, right? And so we in America have to accept and acknowledge the reality that we need others, right?
Hmm.
Fortunately, many of us have families, right? This is now more than ever is a very important time for us to connect with our families, our friends, our communities, and find ways to help each other, right? Um, this is not the first empire to collapse.
Okay.
And even when this empire collapses, the country will still be here,
Oh,
right?
wait a minute, wait a minute. But aren't is the you said the empire is collapsing, but the country will still be here. Is there a difference?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It's
Okay.
just like when we look at the Roman Empire, right? 2000 years ago, the Roman Empire was most of Europe, right? But the country of Rome is the boot that we see in Europe, right? So when the Roman Empire collapsed, it contracted into the landmass that the
Mhm.
people originally were from.
Okay.
Similar situation here in America. The American empire is not just the four corners of this country, right? The
Mhm.
American empire spans way past
Mhm.
our borders. But
Okay.
the American country is different. Even the American country is different than the American corporation.
Hmm.
All right. So um, people know of America as the corporation and confuse that with the country, right? This is
Yes.
yeah, this corporation was founded, right? But before the founding of the corporation, the landmass was here, and there
Right.
were people still here.
I noticed that when we were traveling abroad to Africa, they around the 2000s, the early 2000s, people were calling it the US, United States. And when I was growing up, we only called the country America. So that's when I started realizing there's a difference between the United States Incorporated, a corporation, and the landmass of the country. And I think people think that, they're one and the same. So I appreciate you for explaining that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we need now, as you have been promoting in your channel, is the community. And it's a beautiful thing to
Mhm.
see the community that you are building and that you have built. Because again, this is needed, right? We need to find ways to impact our community in a positive way, right?
Mhm.
There are ways, again, in terms of helping ourselves, right? The individual person come together as a family. We need to look and observe other groups that come to America, how they are successful.
Mhm.
Because when we look at the Chinese, the Asian population, or the Mexicans, the Hispanic population, when they come here, they will come and move in one house,
Yeah.
several families. And a lot of times, Americans, we say, I don't want to give up my freedom. And understandable, but there's a cost to that, right?
Yes,
There's a
sir.
cost to everything in life. And we have to understand the cost and find ways to cut costs, right?
Mm.
So again, why do they decide to move in? We've seen, obviously, if a Mexican family moves into a house in a few years, they could very easily own the block because they will move in several families, pay off that house in a very short time, and we'll have an agreement that once we buy this house, we're going to buy the next house for the next family. Right. So there are strategies that we can use in order to come together and to be prosperous, even in times of downturns and collapses, which we are in and seeing now.
Yes. So before we get into more of the solutions, is there anything else you want to say about this empire collapse?
Well, I want to actually look at how the empire was created, right? 1776, we started the American Revolution. This was against, right? We were fighting against the British Empire at the time. And the irony of it all is that we were opposing taxes, right? So we had the Boston Tea Party, right, where we opposed the taxes, and we fought the war. 1792 is when we went from the British pound being in use in America to the US dollar. That's when the US dollar was created, right? Dollars and currencies are essentially IOUs from the bank. So the bank, at the time of the founding of the country, if you had a $20 bill, you could go to the bank and redeem that $20 bill for an ounce of gold, right? Over the years, America got a little clever, right, and said, we'll confiscate your gold, right? We'll hold your gold for you. We'll hold your silver for you. We'll put it in our banks, right? And also, it was the reason that we use paper currency is because of the weight, right? It's easier to do transactions and transport as opposed to gold and silver and other precious metals.
Okay.
So we have 1913 when the Federal Reserve System was created.
Yes.
Around that time, they were confiscating gold, right? Taking the citizens' gold, right? There was a time in the American history where gold, owning and possessing gold was illegal, right? They made it illegal to own gold. So that shows the importance of the asset of gold, right? It is so valuable that always banks want it, right? But also it has practical use, right? You can use gold in production, right? Obviously as jewelry, but also in the airplanes, in the phones, in a lot of the technology that we use, gold is used, right? There's also a fixed amount of gold, right? It's not infinite. This is the reason why there's a set price.
Okay.
And when the demand is high, the higher the demand, the higher the price for the gold. Right. So we're looking right now today at a time where gold is in high demand. This is the reason, right? This is the reason why the gold prices right now are at around $4,300.
Yes.
An ounce.
Here it is right here. $43. And let me see if it came up. It was just 4,369, and then it popped up 4,371. Right.
Yes, and it will. Yes, I can.
On your end.
And it's projected to go up next year, because again, the economies of the world, the governments of the world are rushing to gold. Right. All of these countries are currently. I'm sorry.
Speaking of gold, I was just saying, speaking of gold, you were saying these countries are rushing towards gold. So I want to encourage the Soul family to consider what he's saying, because if countries and banks are rushing to gold, that means that we should be preparing and getting gold. So let me pause here to say, if anybody is interested in getting gold, then you can contact our affiliate, Miles Franklin Precious Metals Company, for silver and gold, and contact them at 952-929-7006, or send an email to info@milesfranklin.com. And of course, let them know you heard about it from Dr. Kia Pruitt, and you'll get a great price for your product. So you're talking about the issue of gold and why gold's prices are rising.
Absolutely. And so, so gold obviously is an important asset. It's an important asset to add to your wealth portfolio, as you were just mentioning, right? And we, as a people, all people, we need to understand the difference between wealth and riches, right? Riches can be lost overnight. Wealth is accumulated over time, right? We have to understand the difference between spending and investing, right? Spending is something that you do short term. It brings short-term gratification, versus investing. You invest in the future. You invest long-term, right? So when you buy gold and silver, for example, you're not buying this in order to exchange it the next day or the next month. You're buying it in order to hold, because it has a stored value. It has value in it. And these are things that you will be able to pass down to your children and to your grandchildren. And this is what is considered wealth.
You know, Andy Sheckman, the CEO of Miles Franklin, taught me that, because I kept calling silver and gold an investment, because I come from a background where, you know, you invest in things like this. And he said, you have to stop looking at it as an investment and look at silver and gold as wealth, because this is something you pass down to your posterity, your future generations. So I appreciate you for reiterating that.
Absolutely. It's also, I'll say, it's also important to look at different businesses that are needed, right? When we look into the future, we have to say, first of all, looking at the present, what's going on right now, and then projecting into the future, what can I see that will be needed in the future?
Okay.
Right? We have to learn to be more productive as a society, as a community, and as individuals.
Thank you so much. Yeah, because you had said earlier that even as a country, we don't produce anything. We consume and expect everybody to cater to our needs. And I think that has trickled down to us as individuals.
Yes.
And one principle you taught me and the church that you were heading at the time you had Christ Conscious Community International was that most people plan for the weekend. Do you want to finish that sentence for me?
Yes. We'll say I'll use the term successful and non-successful, right?
Okay.
Or we'll say most people
plan
for the weekend. Successful people plan for a lifetime, right? So we all do know that, or expect at some point we will have an expiration date physically.
Right.
So the day will come, but are we prepared for that day? Are we prepared? Do we have a plan, right, for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20, 50 years?
And then you told us that, I want you to go, because you told us when in the church in your sermon, you said, and then some of you will only stop at a 5, 10 year, 50-year plan, whereas successful people, and I'll let you say the rest.
Yeah, let's look at Japan has a 1,000-year plan, right? So we're looking at, you can plan for your life, which is great. You can also plan for the lives of your children and your grandchildren. Now, we don't know exactly what that may look like, right, when we're not here. But the more you plan, the more you prepare, the better of a structure and a path that you can leave to your posterity, to your children and your children's children, right? And again, this is how successful people operate. We look at the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. They have plans, right? They write out strategic plans for not just themselves and their lives and their careers, but for the children's children's children. Wow. And when you think like that, then you start to even make better and more sound decisions for yourself in the right now.
You know, speaking of that, the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people. I remember walking into the bank once. You and I, for those of you who are just joining in, Dexter Lattimore is an economist, a worldwide traveler, a speaker, a former pastor. He writes, he's a musician, and he's going to be working on a book on economics, but he's also my son. But when you were in college, we walked into a bank together, and there were some suckers that were there. And you said to me, Mom, look at that. And I was like, yeah, I'll take a cherry sucker. And you said, I want you to look at what you just called that, a sucker. And then I want you to look at the name of the sucker.
Dum Dum.
So you blew my mind away. What was the significance in suckers being at the bank and the name of the suckers being called Dum Dums?
Well, ironically, the banks and, the government, they're comical, they enjoy a good laugh. Right. So the banks, they consider those who deposit their money into the banks as dummies, as fools, as suckers, because they don't realize that once you put your money in the bank does what it will with your money. Right. And the banks legally only have to have 10% of what they claim in their accounts. They only have to keep 10% of that. Right. So if you deposit $100 into the bank, they'll keep 10 in there. They'll invest the other 90. All right. So the bank is making money off of your money. Mm-hmm. This is the reason why they consider us dum-dums if we're putting our money in their banks.
That's deep. And when you told me that made me made me think about doing more research. And I did realize that once you turn over your money to the bank, actually, they can say they own it. Like you are the creditor. So you're lending your money as a creditor to them to do whatever they will. And they can invest that money somewhere. If they get in trouble, they can do bail-ins. And I was like, oh my God. And Dexter, that just opened my mind up to this whole world of self-preservation, having your own bank, your own family bank, having your own trust to protect your assets. So I'm so grateful that you went into economics. I would have never thought this way had you not, gone into that field of study.
Well, thank you. And as you mentioned earlier for yourself, you said that the information and knowledge that you have is not just for you. All right. I obviously felt the same way growing up and still do today. I didn't gain this information because I wanted to hoard the information to myself to gain wealth only for myself. I wanted this information because I understood that the vast majority of the world does not understand what we're talking about. Right. And so if the world doesn't understand what's going on, then how can they prosper? Right. And so this is the reason why we do not have as much prosperity in the world as what could be possible. Right. And this is the reason why it's important to gain the information, but then also to distribute the information to others, because one person having the knowledge does not benefit the collective. And we have to begin to think more collectively and less individualistic.
Yeah, I agree with that. And now that we have this information, I spend a lot of time, as you know, with all of the children, my grandchildren, teaching these principles. And speaking of banking, the other day I was going past the bank to deposit something to pay a bill. And Amin and Mia were with me, the two grandchildren. You all soul family, you've met them. They were asking me, Mia said, Granny, why do you people put your money in the banks? You people, right? And so Amin said, yeah, that's the dumbest thing in the world. You turn over your money to strangers. Do you know those people? I said, Granny, you know. I was like, well, I've come to know them. No, do you know those people? I said, no. Granny, why do you people put your money in the banks? And they were just having this conference. I couldn't answer it. They said, it's still your money. You don't know them. They could use it. I said, well, I think there are laws in place to protect. They say governments break laws all the time. That's what you've been teaching us.
Right.
And I thought, wow, from the mouths of babies.
Exactly. That's the irony of it all. as a child, a lot of things that the adults did when we were children just didn't make sense. But as we get older, we become adults. We learn certain things, right? We're taught certain things, and we accept these things to be truth. And so when you talk to an average child, they might just ask you, why are you handing over your money to people that you don't know? And it's a very credible question that often we don't have answers to, except that we were told by somebody to do it. And so we do.
And I'm an educator teaching my grandchildren to think for themselves, the importance of critical thinking, the importance of having your own family bank, the importance of gold and silver. And they're like, okay, you're teaching us one thing, but then you're putting your money in the bank to these traders.